Welcome everybody to the first Tech Leaders Launchpad livestream. This is an event where we're going to get together on a monthly basis and talk about what it means to be a tech leader, how we got into tech leadership and what we learned from that. I'm sure, like a lot of you, I made a bunch of mistakes early on in my leadership career. I learned from them, I became better, and I want to share my stories, but also the stories of the people that I know around the community and people who are passionate about sharing everything they've learned. Today, I have with me two very special people. We've got Alan and we've got Selena. They're going to join me on this journey of discussing what it means to be a tech leader. So what we're going to do is we've got a series of questions we're going to ask each other, but I really want this to be a conversation more than just a panel with a bunch of questions. So you'll see that we might not stick to the script. We might kind of talk over each other and have a good old-fashioned yarn. That's perfectly fine. There's also the opportunity for you to ask questions. If you want to ask us questions, stick it in the chat of wherever you're looking at us from, if it's LinkedIn Live or YouTube, and we'll get to those questions at the end. Feel free to ask them as we go through. I'll be collecting, curating, and then asking them to our panel. So let's start off with a round of introductions, and we're going to do one fun fact as well. So the fun fact I've chosen for this month is, what was your first computer? I'll start off with me first. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Andrew Murphy. I've been in the technology industry for almost 2 decades at this point. I've pretty much been every way you can be a software engineer. I started off as a cold fusion developer working for government, and I've worked in SaaS product consultancies and been in tech leadership for pretty much all my career. My first computer was, well, it depends whether you mean, I guess, PC or a computing device. My first computing device was a Spectrum ZX81, which was an amazing computer using BASIC. My first physical, like actual, I guess, Intel PC was a 486 with a coprocessor. Let's move on to Selena.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name's Selena Small. I'm an engineering team lead at Fresho, aspiring CTO, watch out one day, a retired professional kickboxer, and I travel the world speaking at software engineering conferences with my friend Michael and our project Fairly Driven. My first computer, not exactly sure, wasn't really into computers back then, but the family's first computer was this big white clunky desktop machine running Windows 98. I'm sure there's a lot of familiarity with that. I was one of just 2 kids in my class at school who had a computer at home. But the first machine I bought for myself was a MacBook Air, and that was when I was about 26 and started teaching myself to code. So I came to the game a little bit late.
Nice, thanks, Selena. Cool. Alan?
Hi, I'm Alan. I'm an engineering manager at the Lookout Way, ex-interim head of engineering. We build software for care companies to run their businesses. Fun fact about me is my first computer was similar to Andrew. It was a 486 DX2 with a turbo button. And first thing I did was try to get more memory off it by deleting everything. So I did a del star.star and it wouldn't boot anymore. So yeah, that was my first experience.
I've done that myself. My very first VPS that I had, like online hosted server, I accidentally fat fingered and I did rm-rf/ instead of / and ended up deleting everything on the server. And because I'm smart, I did it with sudo, which literally meant I deleted everything. Mistakes you make. We should do a live stream on that. We should do a live stream on biggest mistakes that we've made, because I've got so many to share. So what we're going to do is, for this particular live stream, we're going to go through a little bit of our journeys of leadership and the first leadership roles that we had and what we learned from it, because I think, you know, people learn well from stories, and let's try and tell some stories of what it meant to us to get into that first leadership role and the mistakes we made from it. So The first question we're gonna ask and answer is, what was your first leadership role? Alan, do you want to take us through yours first?
Yeah. So I have been in leadership for about 4 years, and I was an engineering manager to begin with, and I never actually thought being a manager was something I wanted to do, but it was kind of like let's give it a go. I made a career change into uh, programming and development, so it was it felt weird to be like, oh, I'm going to do something that I didn't think I was going to do. And so, um, turns out I actually really liked it, and I really enjoyed the kinds of balance of problems that you get when you're doing engineering management and doing some engineering at the same time. Um, so that was 4 years ago, and I really enjoyed my first experience, but there was also lots of lessons that I learned.
Yeah, everybody learns lessons. Like the fact is that you move into leadership and it's a different skill set to what you were doing when you were in IC, and which just means there's a whole new place for you to learn and make mistakes and become better. It's a very, very common pattern. How about you, Selena?
Well, I should unmute first. It's an interesting question. What was your first leadership role? Because it really depends on what you mean to be classified as a leader. You know, you have to have followers or be paving the way, paving a direction. And loads of people make the misconception that being a manager is by default being a leader, when in fact managing and leading are really two different things, right? So managing is more about organizing, overseeing processes, and leading is more about inspiring and motivating and influencing and culture and things like that. And it's interesting, Alan, you went straight to your leadership role in engineering. I want to go back a little bit further, because outside of tech, I've got an extensive history in hospitality management roles. Way back when I was 16, I was managing the Burger Bar, the local fish and chip shop where I grew up. And by my mid-20s, I've been managing pubs and bars and restaurants and nightclubs. But you know, the key to all of that is I was managing, and I wasn't really a good leader. So I guess that doesn't really answer your question. But sports have been a really big part of my life as well. I've always been really active, and when I was 15, I was appointed the captain of my school's girls' first 11 soccer team. And I guess being a captain means being a leader. You need to rally the troops, and you need to motivate and push the team forward. And that sports leadership has continued into adulthood. So I took up kickboxing and led as an inspiration to others in the gym there. But I'm guessing you're after actually something a bit more tech specific. So in tech,
not necessarily. I love where this is going, because it talks to what leadership is, which is, like you're saying, not management. So, but please keep going.
But in tech, I didn't start as an appointed leader per se. I actually didn't even start my tech career until 27, after finally finding out what code even was and teaching myself to code. So it was my second job, where I currently work at Fresho, when I started feeling some of this leadership, some of this influence that I was able to do. So almost immediately I felt influential to the culture of the development team. I was one of the early engineers in the company, one of the few women in the development team. They asked my opinions, they took my feedback on board, and I helped influence some of the small changes. So I think, technically speaking, I probably started leading in my career at that point. But we had a really senior team, really flat structure. There wasn't huge amounts of opportunity for managing people. But maybe 3 years in, I did start devising and managing larger projects. So I actually influenced some of the projects that have led on to teams that we have now. And so I guess at that point, I was also really leading in my career, leading the direction of where we wanted to go with the product. And it's 2 years ago that I was officially promoted to my first leadership role, as engineering team lead, still at Fresho. And That's probably more than you asked for, but there you go.
That's great. I love that discussion on the difference between leadership and management, and how like you were leading without manager in the title, and it made me kind of reflect on my first leadership role, and I was kind of doing the opposite. I had manager in my title, but I wasn't leading, and it's because I didn't really understand the difference between those two things, and the fact that, you know, being a leader is as much a mindset as anything, and you know, I made a bunch of mistakes in that first job because I didn't understand exactly what you're talking about there. I I was somebody who was promoted to leader based on the fact that I had the most tenure as an engineer, not by dint of my ability to work with other people and lead them. And I'm sure that's a very common experience. Which,
Just can I just say like a minor
yeah, of course.
aside? Just it is like kind of like interesting, you know, when you're IC and you kind of like feel you have more leeway to try things, because like when you have like the authority, now you're like, oh hey, we're doing this now, and then everyone's like, all right, this boss says we're doing this, and it does feel like you have less leeway to just like try things that are, you don't know if they're going to work. And when you're like an IC, then you're just like, I'm just going to do this thing, and you don't have to follow me. It's like a whatever low risk thing. So that's one of the changes I've felt in my like kind of first leadership, you know, authoritative. Like they gave you that title, and then suddenly it feels, oh, I better not mess this up. So I can't just like make stuff up anymore.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You certainly, as soon as you are appointed as a leader, you now have more responsibility. You're answerable to somebody. You have to make the numbers work. You have to justify everything. Whereas as an individual contributor, like you said, you can go run an experiment, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. It was just one person. We learned something from that, but it's not like this whole team has gone down the wrong path and, you know, we've missed our company OKRs or something.
Yeah, I guess there's that element of, as an IC, you're only accountable for your own output, whereas as a leader, you're accountable for the outcomes of an entire team. And there's just this change of what's expected of you that I don't think is discussed when you're past that, you know, management hat. It's a great point. Which leads on to our second question. What do you think was the biggest mistake you made as a leader? I'm going to start off with this one myself. So when I first became a leader, like I said, I was just handed the hat by dint of being the person with the most tenure in the team. I'd been there 18 months as opposed to the people who had just joined there 2 months ago, and so, you know, somebody had to lead the team, and it ended up being me. The biggest mistake that I made was I felt like I was being helpful by being the nexus of all information in the squad. I knew the code base. I built this code base, and the people that had joined the company didn't know the code base, and so I thought I was being helpful by being there to answer all of their questions and being responsive to guide them to get to wherever they wanted to get to in the code base, to implement whatever they wanted to implement in the code base. But I became the crutch for them. I became the person that would only ever give them fish rather than teach them how to use a net and fish themselves. And this got to a point where I couldn't even have my own lunch break. I was being so responsive to what the needs of my team that I didn't have the time to do anything. And I thought that I was being helpful because of this. And looking back on it now, I see that I wasn't empowering them to help themselves. I was being the solution to all of their problems, as opposed to helping them come up with their own solutions to the problems. That was a very hard-earned lesson for me. How about you, Alan?
I think in my first few months, it was really hard for me to go, hey, I need help with this, and asking for help when it's like, I don't know, the kind of things that I'm asking for help is, how do I talk to someone about this? Like, how do I say this thing that's probably hard to say? Like, it's actually, even ask that question, it felt like I felt not like I wasn't capable of doing the job, because I was like, I got to ask someone about, how do I even just say this thing? It feels really uh like I was showing my vulnerability, and it took me a long time to figure out that that's how you're supposed to learn. That's how you're supposed to get feedback, is to go, hey, I don't know how to do this. I need help doing it. So I feel like part of the reason that I was given this role was because they thought I could do it, right? It's like, and then that's how I was capable of, doing programming, being an IC, was, oh, okay, I'll just go figure it out on my own. But I didn't have that. It wasn't. I didn't pick it up that easily.
Yeah, there weren't that many great resources, back when I became a leader, for me to find how to do this stuff. And I don't feel like we talked about it and discussed it as an industry as much as we do now. I resonate with that quite a lot. How about you, Selena?
I don't make mistakes. No, I can't speak so much to my current role because I'm currently in it, and I haven't been in it a huge amount of time. But if I look back through my journey and the various management and leadership roles that I've had, especially the management roles, the biggest mistake I've made is on actually a similar vein to both of you guys, or maybe not. It's people. I'm an excellent manager, like second to none, through and through. I'm very good with time and process and scheduling and all of that stuff. But for my entire life, I've not been particularly great with people. As a child, I was a bit of a recluse. I didn't want to play with the other kids. As a teenager, I was more interested in the activities I was doing than the people I was doing them with. As a young adult, I was in a hurry. I had no patience or time for anyone. In fact, I was quite rude to some people. And now I feel a constant self-doubt and social anxiety about what people might think of me. So I suppose that could all be seen as more of a flaw than a mistake. But I guess the mistake was not realizing and recognizing sooner the value that people have. And that, life is just better with friends. Being a good leader is about, it's about creating culture and a community, and it's about the group, and it's about the people in there, and those people coming together and bringing their best skills and doing their best work and doing the best thing that they can do together, because no one person is really going to have a great time on their own forever. Having those people together and really recognizing that is really the key here. In anything you want to achieve, if you get a group of people and they have the right mindset and the right culture, you can pretty much do anything.
I feel like that's a very common engineer mindset. We're trained to think about process and systems and architecture. We're not trained to think about people and how the people fit into those things, and how they all tie together. And I did a CS degree at university, and 90% of it was useless. And most of that 90% was here's how to think about a SQL query in the pure underlying mathematics of it. It's like that. I've never touched that in my job ever. And it doesn't train us to think about these things in a helpful way. This is a good segue to one of the questions we've got here. So Ashik asked the question, would be good to discuss how becoming a manager is not a promotion, but more of a career change. I think that's something that we could all agree on. How do we navigate this transition effectively? Selena, do you want to talk on that?
I'll have a go, since I recently well, I'm still in the process of doing that really. I would say, how do we transition from engineer to manager effectively? Very, very carefully. Well, you're going for it's actually a bit of a hard balance. I think you could potentially go from an individual contributor to a purely management role, and I think that would be a massive jump because you would be literally changing your career entirely. What I've done is I've moved into a tech lead role, so it's more 50-50. So part-time IC, part-time EM, individual contributor, engineering manager, for those who aren't familiar with the terms. So there's a bit of, it's a bit of an introduction to that kind of management path, but not so far down the management path that you can't potentially go back to individual contributor if you decide that that's what you really want to be doing. So you've kind of got, your foot in the door, you're getting a bit of a taste. The biggest difficulty is I would say the biggest difficulty is time management and making sure you're not spread too thin. There will suddenly be a lot more meetings that you never had to attend before. Suddenly you're going to be involved in more conversations that you weren't involved in before. You need to now think about maybe 2 or 3 pieces of work that are happening at once instead of just the thing that you're focused on. And so it's really important in that, halfway kind of tech lead role, if you've still got an individual contributor component, to make sure that you do block out some time, like some good chunks of time, to sit down and continue working on the things that you're wanting to get across the line, because those meetings, they will take over if you are not really careful in managing your schedule.
Yeah, and that only gets more and more as you progress in your career. My most recent job as an employee was manager of managers, and the number of times I'd have one of them look at my calendar and go, "How do you get any work done? You're in meetings all the time." I was like, "Well, yeah, that's my job." Like a vast majority of my job as a leader of leaders is meetings, and only about 25% of my time is like conscious thinking, locked away in a room coming up with strategy.
That's right. I will actually just add one more thing onto that, because you're kind of going down that path anyway. The leadership role is about empowering and encouraging and helping other people to achieve those things that you would have done as an individual contributor, rather than you doing it yourself. And so the transition can be really hard because now you're not getting the praise and the feedback loop on any of the work that you're doing. If it's good, it's going to take a lot longer for you to get that feedback and for you to realize that, hey, what I have done is effective. And so there's a little bit of mindset to be involved in there. And what we want to do as leaders is we want to help and empower and encourage other people to do well. And if they do well, then you've done well.
And it's really hard to know if you've done that, in any short time period. Like you're right. Like that's such a good point. It's analogous in the IC world though, because it's like a progression of the same. If you think a junior engineer, when I was a junior engineer, I was happy if my code executed and then compiled and ran, and you get that feedback straight away. As a mid-level engineer, I was caring more about, does my code pass the unit tests? Does it do what it's meant to do, as opposed to does it just even execute? And then as a senior engineer, I was caring more about well-structured code, well put together systems. And again, these things, like you're saying, the time horizon on them expands, and the ambiguity of the success criteria expands. So I think it's a super important point you're making, and for anybody who's feeling that now, who's feeling this lack of a sense of success because of this change in what success is measured by, just reflect on your past career and see that it's a progression of something you've already been through as an IC. And again, we're probably going to say this over and over. It keeps going. as a head of, as a director, how do I know if I'm doing a job running the team of 100 people that I was running? Wait 3 to 6 months and maybe get a glimpse. Could I have done the job better? It's really hard to tell. Like, the ambiguity and the time horizons just keep getting longer and more ambiguous. Alan, anything you want to add to this discussion? The question from Ashik?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is like engineering in engineering management is that you have to focus on your tooling. So, you know, like your editor, you're like, I want it to be set up in the way I want it. So this is now, you have to figure out what is tooling for engineering management, because one of the things of making that transition is if you're not good at calendar management, that's not going to work out. I can tell you, I was really bad at it. I was really bad at that. I would like miss meetings. I'd like make a meeting and it was in the next week. I still do this sometimes, but I was really bad at showing up on time to meetings, putting meetings in, doing recurring stuff. Like all that stuff is just like more people are depending on you, and you need to show up and be able to prioritize correctly. So that's the tooling of an engineering management. And you know, coming from an engineering background, the thing to do is to automate that and make sure that you are, you know, at least showing up at the right time in the right place. And then next thing is you got to figure out what's important. Like why are we having this meeting? What is it that we need to get out of this thing? Building those processes and tools is easy to transition from being engineer to an engineering manager, at least. And if there already existing tools in your organization, go figure them out. Go read them. Go ask existing engineering managers, how do you do this?
Yeah, it's a good one. And actually, along with that, you know, having meetings and discussions, because they do take up so much of your time, you need to really figure out a way to make them efficient without cutting off critical information or making people feel invaluable or not important during those discussions. So a huge part of what we need to do is really focus on the culture and the people, and does everyone feel valued? Does everyone feel they have a voice? Do they all feel they're listened to? I actually spend a huge amount of my time just having one-on-ones, coffees, chats with various people around the organization, perhaps more than I would have done as an individual contributor. So where I work at Fresho, we're pairing 100% of the time as individual contributors anytime we're working on the code. So we do get a lot of, you know, person interaction. But outside of that, as I move into this leadership position, I need to be talking with the CEO. I need to be talking with the CTO. I need to be talking with the other team leads. I need to be talking with people that are outside of the scope of just the person I'm working with today. And having a really good relationship, you know, because obviously when people feel valued and they feel happy, then they bring their best.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how talking to people who are now your peers, as in other engineering managers or, you know, people doing the same job as you, is important to make that transition, because it can feel lonely and like just you're now managing this thing. I guess you're on your own kind of thing. But that's because you don't like directly work with someone like pairing, or you're not like doing this thing directly. So it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll leave everyone alone and make sure that I'm trying to deliver the thing somehow. Talking to other people doing the same job as you and going, you know, hey, how do you do this, is really important to feel like you have a community and feel like you have a someone to, you know, just to talk to about things that you're both having problems with.
We do this with pair programming. We should find a way to do pair leadership. I mean, obviously you don't want another leader in a performance management discussion with somebody, but you know, there's definitely things we can pull from that. I'm going to use this as a perfect segue to one of the questions we had prepared. We've been talking about this anyway for the past few minutes, but we've got lots of great ideas. I love everything you're saying about how to be a better leader. How did you learn that? How did you learn to become a better leader? How did you learn these pieces of advice that you've just been giving us? Alan, do you want to kick off?
Okay, so I've been doing this 4 years. I'm not sure if I'm any better than I started. I can't like definitively say that I'm better, because it's really hard to measure. It is actually, that's one of the most difficult things to figure out is, am I doing a good job? And like sometimes, early on in my career, it felt like I was doing a good job when I was trying my hardest. But then, when you're trying your hardest and then you're not getting the result you want, and then it's like, I'd rather you have not done that. And I'm like, well, what am I doing? I got to take a step back. Just because I feel like I'm working doesn't mean it's like effective. It's like I'm just like spinning my wheels really hard and like trying to be something. But I had to take a step back and just try and like listen more, and just actually try to understand what people were saying to me and what they wanted. I think that's really important as a leader and as a manager. It's difficult. It's super difficult. I don't think everyone says exactly what they mean, and I don't think that it's easy for us to like interpret. And I'm not sure you should be like trying to like, this is like some Game of Thrones thing. I'm going to figure out all these like different permutations that are going to happen. So I don't recommend that. I'm just saying, try to understand people, try to talk to them. It shouldn't always be like a transactional thing of like, hey, we're going to do this. All right, bye. Sometimes you need to understand people like at a personal level. And I recommend doing that. That's one of the best parts of being like a manager is that's like part of your job is to understand what's going on in at work, and also whatever it is that they're bringing, part of their personality, etc. Those kinds of things that they want to work on. So first one is just understand. Try to listen and understand. The related to that is like ask for feedback. It's actually people will be really willing. If it's your first role, just go, hey, how do you think I'm doing? What is it that you want me to do? How are one-on-ones going? Is there a different kind of format you want to do? Do you find these meetings useful? Those kinds of things. People will be willing to do that. And I think asking that early on opens that feedback to be both ways, rather than saying like, first thing I'm going to do is tell you what you're doing wrong. That seems like a bad first interaction. The other thing is reading stuff. I know, like we're at the Tech Leaders Launchpad, so I'm sure Andrew's got lots of material. And then after this is not a sponsored segment, but anyway, and then practice it's really hard. We as engineers have done like code practice. We have done katas or I don't know, exorcism, those kinds of things. Practicing leadership or management, at least, is something you can do and should try to do with the tools that you learn, because it's really hard to do it when it's like super, super, super high stakes. Like suddenly, like this person's either going to get, is in a really bad place, and then you're going to have to like, this is the first time you're doing this thing. That's going to be really stressful.
Selena?
How did I learn to be a better leader? Well, there's an amount of trial and error, obviously. But I would say a lot of self-reflection. I think, putting the time in to reflect and consider what kind of leader you want to be, to look at other leaders and decide who you want to emulate or who you want to definitely not emulate. And really being clear in your values is probably an important step as well, because it gives you some direction in where you want to go with this. something to focus on, something to improve on, and something to learn from. And you know what? Actually, similar thing. I just put more effort into talking to people. I'm probably still not that great with people, but I'm a hell of a lot better than I was 10 years ago. So I spend a lot of time, like I said, having one-on-ones with people throughout the business, talking to team members who give me feedback, and talking to peers who give me actually more honest feedback, and talking to mentors as well, who give me advice and share thoughts and insights. So I've kind of always had mentors throughout my tech career. So that's how I got into tech in the first place. I had really good mentors early on. I had a period where I was kind of on my own, and now in a leadership position, I have mentors again. And they really help talking through ideas and learning from their experiences, and sometimes just rubber ducking.
Yeah, finding a community, I think, is really important running through all of this. Like that community could be inside your organization, like Alan talks about earlier. Other EMs within your company could be outside your organization. It could be like-minded folks. It could be mentors. I think that talking about this and talking about the job is a narrative through what both of you have said. Another element I'd like to throw in, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but I teach, I train, I write blog posts, and part of me doing that has always been to help me learn. I kind of modeled what I did as an engineer and applied it to leadership. If I wanted to learn a new language, a new framework, a new technology, I would find a way to teach that to somebody else, because the way of having to get it in your head and understand it and grok it and really live it is to teach. And so, because I did that as an engineer, teaching technical skills to juniors and people around me, I kind of modeled that when I moved into leadership. And I thought, okay, how am I going to learn this the best way? Well, I'm going to teach it, because that means I have to fully understand it. We've got a bunch of great questions coming through. Let's pick one of those. So I've got a question from Stuart. How much do you find you have to stay technical in this role? Anybody want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll go. So I'm, like I said, I'm a team lead. My team consists of 5 people, including myself and a product manager. One of them at the moment currently happens to be the principal engineer as well. And so by having him in the team, it means that, I don't need to stay as technical, but I do know that he's probably going to move on at some stage. So I've got to keep a foot in the door, because the other engineers in the team are potentially going to be leaning on me a little bit for experience and knowledge. But I do work in a relatively small company. So we're like 18 engineers in total across 3 teams. We're very tight knit. And like I said, we pair program 100% of the time, which means, nobody needs to know everything. We're very big on knowledge sharing, very big on conversations. The reason that I try to stay a little bit technical still is because that does leave the option open for me to potentially not take the management path in the future, but go back to the tech side. Although I'm pretty destined for this management path, I think. But what I hear is that, even at more advanced levels, and maybe Alan can talk to this, you still have an opportunity to switch back, right? You've switched careers once already. You can do it again back the other way. So whether you stay current with technical, or you have side projects, or you come back into it later on, you're always going to be having some technical conversations. So you're always going to need some amount of technical in there. I suppose the question should be, how technical do you need to remain? And it really depends on your team size and the organization that you're in, I'd say.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, and at least when it says like engineering manager or something, that basically means like nothing. Depending on what company it is, it's going to be a different job, basically. So the role is probably there's many different permutations of it. Some of them will be very technical, and some of them will be completely not technical. I've done one completely not technical one, and right now this one is half. So I was interim head of engineering, and that was basically running policies, hiring, those kinds of things. It was mostly like a manage the health of the engineering team and grow it. That didn't fit me. That's not doesn't represent all parts of my personality or my what the things I wanted out of my job. So I didn't want to continue doing it. It was just I felt like I was the best person to do it at the time. So I think there's probably lots of different ones that you should try and find the one that has the right mix for you. I like having like a 50-50. It's like a welcome change to be able to go, I'm working on this really deep technical problem, and also I'm working on my relationships. That actually is a good balance for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because
Sorry, go on.
sorry, no, that's a good point, because if you think out there, you get CTOs, right? CTOs, like the top level of technology department. You get CTOs at startups who are 100% hands on the code. They don't deal with board meetings or anything like that. They are setting the direction of the technology, and they're building the product. And then you get CTOs at a much larger company, or a company of a different scale, and they don't have a second to write any code. And even if they had a technical discussion, they don't have the time to implement that. And their focus is maybe more on the leadership team or facing upwards to the board. So it really depends on what you're after. Interesting, Alan mentioned he's pretty on board with that 50-50. I think after trying to do that for a while, I think I would prefer to do one or the other. Because it would simplify the role a lot more if you only have to focus on one of those things or the other thing. But it is an interesting challenge, and it's a really good way to find out, like I said before, get your foot in the door to see which of these is more your flavor, and still easily change your mind.
I mean, the bad news is the job title engineering manager can mean many different things. But the good news is that it can mean many different things, and you can find, the role that suits you. Speaking as somebody who, my last role, like I said, I was manager of managers. I think technical can mean many different things. Part of technical can mean writing code. And did I write production code as part of that job? No. But it was still a technical role, because I was still involved in some architecture discussions. I was still prodding and asking questions and getting my EMs to think about the architectures they were building, and we were still discussing build or buy discussions on various technology based things. So technology, being technical, doesn't have to mean writing code. It can mean many different things as well. Cool. All right. One more question. So the infrastructure I'm using doesn't allow you to see who this is, but this is Lee Shepherd. He's asking a question. When you go through that transition, has your workplace mentored you, or did you figure it out as you go? As you go, is there ongoing support and mentoring, or has this been self-paced, etc.? Alan, do you want to go first?
I'm pretty sure Andrew's asking me to go first, because Andrew provides training for us. So at our workplace, we now do training, leadership training for all managers, and that's provided. And we also have like a kind of leadership resources. So if you need to do something that's like kind of spicy, you can go read, like, okay, what do you do? How do you do it? What are things to look out for? Those kinds of things are super helpful, because that's like, it's your job now, and even though it's like, you kind of don't want to do it, having more knowledge is better than kind of like procrastinating and putting it out of your mind. So we're lucky enough to have those kinds of things. There's heaps of resources online, and maybe you can ask ChatGPT how do you do this thing as well.
Please don't. Selena?
It would be unfortunate if ChatGPT gave you better answers than TLL. I'm sure they won't. We don't have coaches or we don't use Tech Leaders Launchpad, and we don't have a kind of company like that, or per se. What we do have is we do have a mentor program within the company. So actually anyone in any position can request to be a mentor or to be mentored. And we try to assign those people, someone appropriate within the business. So in my role, I am mentored by LMH, Lisa Mills Hill, who is an advisor to the board of directors, actually. So she's a really good mentor for me because she's got a huge amount of leadership experience. So depending on your goals and what you're after, we try to have mentors internally. Aside from that, as I've said before, we're a relatively small company. We haven't had too many spicy situations, but when we have, we've been more inclined to form committees or work together in smaller groups to try and figure out what is the problem. So in the tech department, we have a tech leads team, and if we can't figure it out between ourselves, we might bring in the CTO or the CEO or somebody with more leadership experience and more knowledge in that area.
Yeah, external mentors, I think, can be really valuable. Like I've used them previously, brought them in if we've had a particular spicy situation. I've been in companies that have unfortunately had multiple rounds of redundancies, and there's no way to do it well. There's only ways to do it less badly. And bringing in people who have experience of that has been really hugely valuable for me in hopefully not tripping on the easy mistakes that could easily, happen. Cool. All right, let's go through another question. This is an interesting one. So this is from Scott Farland. What do you think are the key differences between leadership traits and behaviors in a non-leadership role versus what is expected of someone in a leadership role? I've never seen this question before, Scott. It's a very interesting one. I'm gonna posit my answer to it first. Hopefully, I'm interpreting your question correctly. If not, please let me know. I think the question you're asking here is, we talked earlier about how leadership is not necessarily a job title. It's a mindset. It's a way that you approach your job, and I think that's really what you're getting at here. Are there differences between somebody who is in a leadership role versus somebody who's not in a leadership role, and what's expected differently? I think for me, the answer here lies in the concept of leverage and force multiplier effect. So, if we take a principal engineer, for example, they're still an IC in the sense of, the value that they add to an organization is largely technical in nature, but I would still say that they're a leader. Because what I will be expecting of a principal and staff engineer is to be that force multiplier, to have that leverage effect on a company. And if a principal engineer is writing features in a product, they're not necessarily giving that leverage and that force multiplier effect. Whereas if they're working cross squad, if they're enabling and supporting other teams, you can build that into it. So I think for me, it's more about the scale and the shift between an hour of your time resulting in an hour of value for an organization versus an hour of your time becoming a force multiplier effect and resulting in more than an hour of value to an organization. And I think it's a sliding scale. It's a sliding scale from when you first start your career. And let's be honest, when you're a junior engineer, it's probably a less than 1x force multiplier. You're probably a net negative value contributor to the company. But the company invests in you, you grow, you develop, and you enable yourself to become a force multiplier at later points in your career. And so I don't think there's this demarcation point. I think it's a sliding scale throughout your career, and hopefully you end up adding more and more value per hour. That's my thoughts. Selena?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You mentioned a non-leadership role versus a leadership role, so the specific roles. But I actually think you don't need a role to be a leader, and you can be a leader in any role. You could have a junior that comes in and has influence over how we do things because we want to make things more accessible to people who are new to the team. For example, I think you have the same traits. But the more experienced you become, so the kind of, I suppose the further up the traditional kind of career ladder that you climb, whether it's in management or in an individual contributor role, it's just more of those, those particular traits. So your job as a leader is to inspire, to motivate, to influence, to help improve the culture. And the further along you go, the more you're expected to do those things. I don't think there's necessarily stuff that you do. I don't think any of those traits necessarily apply to one role over the other. I think it's just the amount that it applies increases as you progress.
Yeah, that's I related to what Andrew was saying. I think that empowerment part is actually probably the biggest thing I would expect from someone who's in a leadership role, in a way that that's how you get false multiplication. It's you couldn't do this before and now you can. That is, I would expect that from someone doing a leadership role rather than someone who's in a non-leadership role. That's probably like one big difference, is if you're given the express authority to do something like that. I expect that from someone who's being given that authority, and that can be a lot of things. So one of the things I think people in leadership roles have is they have more effect on the environment, the environment and the processes that are around the stuff. It's like, I know, Selena, you've been saying a lot about culture and the team and the team health, those kinds of things. I think leadership has way more impact on that in terms of going, hey, we're going to do this now because reasons, and that will like kind of reverberate, I guess, like all around, in a way that just one person who doesn't have that title or that position won't be able to do. Because if it's just like a one person thing, it's much harder to like make big changes to your culture.
It's interesting that you mentioned authority, because just being given a leadership role doesn't magically make you a leader. You need people to follow you, and actually you can achieve that at any level. You don't have to be given that role. You just need, you talk to one person, you share your ideas, you convince them that that's right. They go, okay, fuck, that's amazing. You go talk to somebody else, you do the same thing, and then sooner, before you know it, the culture has potentially changed or processes have changed as a result of something that you started, whether you're in an official leadership role or not. You could have someone who's appointed as a leader, and actually the whole team just goes, this guy's talking out his ass. I don't want to do any of that. Sorry for my language. I don't know if I can do that. Stream.
PG stream.
I think in the recording, I'm going to need to bleep most of what you're saying to me. I agree, but I want to add another dimension to that, which is I think maybe what Alan, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, Alan. I think what you're saying is, in a lot of companies, having that title lends more weight to the things you're saying. Whether or not that should be true, it's the nature of a lot of organizations. And you know, the things that you do as a leader, the behaviors that you exhibit, give people permissions to exhibit those behaviors themselves, and kind of lends more credence to that way of doing things. And it's not a conscious, driven from authority type thing. It's just more the result of a lot of the cultures in organizations. And should they be that way? Probably not. But I think a lot of them are that way. And being aware of that as a leader in one of those organizations can be important to understand that the way you act has implications beyond just the outcomes of the immediate action you're making. Is that kind of what you were trying to express, Alan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, this goes back to what I was saying when I was like, as an IC, you can try things more easily because you don't have that expectation from other people looking up. Up is maybe the wrong. Looking at you for what is acceptable behavior, or what is what are the company's values? You know, how do we express those values? Those things I would expect from, you know, leaders more than I would expect from people ICs, but hopefully that just means that, you know, it's multiplied.
Awesome. Just want to point this comment out. Alex just saying that he's had a lot of eureka moments in this, and is new to his leadership role. Thank you for sharing that, Alex, and I'm sure we wish you all the best in your new leadership role. It can be scary, but if you're coming along, you're learning from other people, and you're taking a growth mindset to it, I think you're heading down the right pathway. This is hard to go it alone, and by, you know, joining this kind of stuff, talking about it, learning, being part of a community of leaders, you're doing all the right things. So I'm sure you'll be successful. And I think that's it. I think we're getting to the end now of this 1 hour discussion on our first leadership journeys, what it means to be a leader. Thank you so much, Alan and Selena, for joining me. Thank you, everybody else on the live stream, for asking your questions, taking part in this. We're going to be doing this on a regular monthly basis, so please hold your horses. We will be back. It's not going to be for another month, but I'll have more people joining me. If you've got feedback on this, please share it. Like I said in the beginning, this is the first time we're doing this. I want to learn, I want to become better, and I want to make it even more valuable for you. So please share with me the things you enjoyed, the things you think we could do better next time, and I will hopefully see you all next month. Thanks again, Alan and Selena.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.